There's a house we can build. Every room inside is filled with things from far away. The special things I compile, each one there to make you smile on a rainy day. They can say it all sounds crazy. They can say we've lost our minds. I don't care if they call us crazy. Run away to a world that we design. Every night I lie in bed, the brightest colors fill my head. A million dreams are keeping me awake. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see. A million dreams is all it's gonna take. Oh, a million dreams for the world we're gonna make.
Hello and welcome to the Tech for a Better Planet Symposium. My name is James Crawshaw. I'm an analyst with Omdia and I'll be moderating today's proceedings. We're going to start with an opening speech and then we'll have two panel discussions. The first about environmental protection and the second about green technology. So with that, I'm going to hand over now to our first speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, media friends, good morning. Welcome to today's Asia Pacific Tech for a Better Planet webinar. I'm Jay Chen from Huawei Asia Pacific. It's my honor to welcome you to join our discussion on how technology can empower an inclusive and green society for our Asia Pacific region. The pandemic has transformed our lives, and we must reflect on the relationship between our planet, our society, and ourselves, with a keen eye to the severity of climate change and other environmental problems. As a leading global provider of ICT infrastructure and smart devices, Huawei believes the technology will play a critical role as we move towards a better planet. Our mission is to bring digital to every person, home, and organization for a fully connected, intelligent world. With over 30 years of experience focusing on connectivity for bridging the digital divide, we are now leveraging our knowledge and the continued investment in R&D to drive sustainable development and the digital energy innovation in three key areas. First, reducing carbon emissions with innovative ICT solutions. Our innovation in manufacturing processes, packaging, transportation, and recycling all contribute to environmental protection across ICT product life cycles. As an example, our 5G equipment uses 20% less energy than our competitors. And working with our partners and suppliers on a greener supply chain, our solutions help entire industry reduce their carbon emissions. Second, promoting renewable energy. Our Huawei Smart PV solution is being used in more than 60 countries, including Singapore, Indonesia, and Thailand, cutting power generation costs by around 10% compared to fossil energy. Third, contributing to a circular economy with eco-friendly materials and solutions. Our device recycling program has been expanded to around 50 countries and regions and recycled more than 4,500 tons of electronic waste. And this is just scratching the surface. To realize our goals, it's equally important to promote the public-private synergies, partner with industry stakeholders, cultivate young innovation, and raise public awareness. I'm a strong proponent of working together to address the challenges in front of us. And I look forward to more collaboration for an inclusive society that leverages technology to make our planet a better place for future generations.
Distinguished participants, speakers, and hosts of this symposium. My name is Syed Ismail Shah, and I am the OIC for the ITU Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone watching. I'm very pleased to be part of this symposium on technology for a better planet and thank the organizers for inviting ITU to this event. Let me start by noting just how important staying connected is today. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted just how critical digital technologies are for communicating, learning, working, doing business, and interacting with the society and economy. However, we must be aware of the impact of this we have on the environment around us. Climate change is a profound global challenge that is transforming the face of the world. At current rates of extinction, scientists predict that two-thirds of all avian, mammal, butterfly, and other planet species will be extinct by end of this century. We at the ITU understand the gravity of this challenge. To do our part, we are exploring information communication technologies or ICT use cases and building partnership standards and international consensus on how and where ICT can help address climate change. Through our study group 5 at the ITU Standardization Bureau, we have taken the lead on setting standards for energy efficiency of ICT equipment, as well as studies on methodologies for evaluating ICT effects on climate change and publishing guidelines for using ICTs in an eco-friendly manner. Additionally, our ITU Development Bureau is taking lead on the issue of e-waste or WEEE, waste electrical and electronic equipment. Globally, every human being annually produces 7.3 kg of e-waste. While developed countries produce more than their share, e-waste is piling up in the developing world. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to dive deep into the e-waste problem. According to the ITU e-waste Global e-waste Monitor 2020, some 4.1 billion people are connected to the internet, and the number of mobile cellular telephone subscriptions is higher, currently greater than the global population. However, this success has downsides. Higher levels of disposable income, urbanization, and industrialization are leading to growing amounts of throwaway ICT, and thus e-waste Indeed, a record 53.6 million metric tons of e-waste discarded products with battery or plugs, such as computers and mobile phone, is reported to have been generated worldwide in 2019, up from 9.2 million metric tons 5 years ago. Of these, only 17.4% of e-waste was officially documented as formally collected and recycled. This problem is acute in Asia. We generated the greatest amount of e-waste in 2019, some 24.9 million metric tons, followed by the America 13.1, Europe 12, while Africa and Oceania generated 2.9 and zero point 0.7 million metric tons respectively. These statistics are extremely disturbing. Toxic and hazardous substances are found in many types of electronic equipment and pose severe link to human health and the environment if not handled in an environmentally sound manner. We need to do more, especially when the ITU predicts a global e-waste to reach 74 million metric tons by 2030, which is almost double the 2014 figure. In recognition of this challenge, in 2018, the ITU's Plenipotentiary Conference established a target to increase the global e-waste recycling rate to 30% by 2023. Our member states are striving to meet this goal. The number of countries that have adopted a national e-waste policy, legislation, or regulation has increased from 61 to 78 between 2014 and 2019. In many regions, however, regulatory advances are slow, enforcement is low, and the collection and proper e-waste management is poor. The ITU stand ready to assist. We have a program dedicated to e-waste policy and regulatory development, where member states can request ITU's technical assistance and capacity building support. Ladies and gentlemen, despite these stark figures, we must not forget the opportunities of the circular economy. What we know today is that only 17.4% of 2019's e-waste was collected and recycled. This means that gold, silver, copper, platinum, and other high-value recoverable material conservatively valued at $57 billion, a sum greater than the gross domestic product of most countries, were mostly dumped or burned rather than being collected for treatment and reuse. If we harness this waste productively, there will be unprecedented opportunities in terms of job creation and economic growth. I eagerly look forward to the discussion during the symposium on the business cases that can be developed around the circular economy using innovative techniques. It is widely acknowledged that the issue of climate change is rapidly emerging as a global concern, which needs a global response. I invite all stakeholders to work collectively on issues and policies that will shape the future of the generations to come so that we will have a brighter and cleaner future. ITU remains ready to partner in line with the needs and priorities of our member states. Thank you very much.
On behalf of IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, I am delighted to welcome you to this symposium on Tech for a Better Planet. IUCN is a proud partner of this very timely and important event, and we thank Huawei for this opportunity. As the world's oldest and largest environmental organization, IUCN seeks to build on its long history of nature conservation while also embracing cutting-edge technological innovations in pursuing our shared vision with members and partners for a just world that conserves and values nature. Established over 7 years ago in 1948, IUCN assists societies throughout the world to conserve the integrity and diversity of nature and to ensure that any use of natural resources is equitable and ecologically sustainable. We are a unique membership organization consisting of over 90 state members and more than 1,300 government agencies, NGOs, and indigenous peoples organizations. Our work is also supported by a network of over 18,000 voluntary experts in a wide range of fields, including species conservation, protected areas, environmental education, and environmental law. With the potentials and challenges of today's so-called fourth industrial revolution, we seek to explore and harness the power of extraordinary technology advances in creating shared value of nature conservation for societies. In this regard, IUCN is very pleased to be working in partnership with Huawei on a project called Tech for Nature, which is seeking to scale up success in nature conservation through digital technology innovation. One of its flagship sites for the project is Khao Yai National Park, Thailand's first national park and a World Heritage Site. In this park, we are exploring various technological solutions, including the use of digital tools to monitor ecosystem change, mitigate human-wildlife conflict, and enhance the visitor experience. The final project design is under discussion with the Department of National Parks and Huawei and will be determined soon. For this and similar initiatives, IUCN believes that technology can contribute to conservation in three particularly important ways: by increasing accessibility, by improving efficiency, and by enhancing accountability. First, on accessibility, technology can play a huge role in increasing public engagement in conservation and data collection. It can, for example, be used to enhance environmental education and outreach, and to engage with a wide range of stakeholder groups. It can also be used to generate data through citizen science. There are many apps available these days which enable the general public to record biodiversity and upload the data to a centralized database. In this regard, IUCN shares Huawei's vision of technology for everyone, which seeks to ensure that all people, regardless of their wealth, education, gender, age, race, or nationality, have access to the tools and the infrastructure they need to mobilize technological solutions, including access to telecommunications networks and digital infrastructure. Second, on efficiency. Technology can also play a significant role in supporting more efficient conservation action. One excellent example is the camera trap, which is now widely used around the world to assist in wildlife surveys and biodiversity monitoring. Camera trapping has many advantages over other more traditional methods of data collection. Camera traps can remain in position for long periods of time. They are relatively non-invasive and do not disturb the natural behavior of wildlife. They produce verifiable data, and they offer a highly repeatable method of data collection and more efficient data transmission if they are connected to cell networks. Similarly, the use of AI can dramatically reduce the time required to analyze large and complex sets of conservation data. And more broadly, in times of emergencies and crisis, such as under this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, technology enables us to continue to connect, to communicate, and to collaborate. Thirdly and finally, on accountability. Technology can be effectively mobilized to enable conservation actors and actions to be more accountable to stakeholders, interest groups, and the general public. Technology helps nurture more responsible leaders at all levels and across sectors who make more informed decisions, keep their promises, and deliver the best outcomes. Among IUCN's institutional milestones is its contribution to the design and adoption of many international environmental conventions, including the Convention on Biological Diversity and the World Heritage Convention. In continuing to support parties in implementing these global agreements, IUCN helps provide the scientific base, offer technical expert guidance, and generate empirical evidence. Thanks to technology for unlocking the potential for knowledge sharing through innovative learning and communication platforms. And that is why I personally look forward to listening to this event's distinguished panel of resource persons. You bring invaluable richness, diversity, and depth to today's discussion of our common desire of making technology work better for conservation. And finally, let us remember that Tech for a Better Planet is more than just technology-driven change. Let us challenge ourselves to harness converging technologies in the physical, digital, and biological worlds towards a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable future for all.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's Asia Pacific Tech for a Better Planet webinar. Together, we will explore how technology can empower a green society. Climate change and biodiversity loss are two of the biggest environmental challenges facing the global community today. The Asia Pacific enjoys some of the richest biodiversity and the fastest economic growth in the world. But the region has seen a critical decline in biodiversity and an increase in the effects of the climate change. The WWF's Living Planet Index reports a 45% decline in species since the 1970s. Equally, carbon emissions are on the rise. The region produced 33% of the global total of carbon dioxide in 2014. But a big change does not happen. It is on track to emit 45% by 2030. Now, more than ever, we needed to reassess our relationship with nature and move faster towards nature-positive and low-carbon growth models. We believe that technology is a key part of the solution. As IUCN mentioned, technology can help improve the accessibility and efficiency of the conservation efforts. We have worked with partners like IUCN, Rainforest Connection, governments, and the ICT sector to protect nature with technology. In the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, we are applying bioacoustics technology and cloud AI to prevent illegal logging and poaching in rainforests. In Thailand and China, we are working with IUCN to protect endangered species, including elephants and Hainan gibbon. Advances in technology can help us better understand and protect nature and reduce the impact of human activity on the planet. It can also help the ICT industry and other sectors to move to low-carbon models that use less energy to transmit, process, and data. At the same time, it can make energy systems more efficient. For example, 5G uses just 1/10 of the energy that 4G uses per bit, but supports up to 30 times more traffic. Digital technologies are crucial to minimizing energy use and emissions in other industries. For example, digital technology helps improve energy networks, and data is a key resource in the Internet of Energy. Huawei's smart PV solutions, for example, can cut power generation costs by up to 7% and slash carbon emissions. The solution has been deployed in various scenarios in 60 countries, including Singapore Changi Airport and the Sumatra Institute of Technology and Bangkok Airport. In the Asia Pacific, we will continue to deepen our collaboration with customers, governments, NGOs, enterprise, and ecosystem partners to achieve a low-carbon and a green future. Together, we can build a green and a prosperous Asia Pacific. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to Tech for a Better Planet Symposium. This is the panel about environmental protection, and I'm joined today by Kun Siriporn Sriaram, who is Thailand Business and Biodiversity Network Alliance Manager for the IUCN Thailand. IUCN is the International Union for Conservation of Nature. I'm also joined by Nilo Tamoria, who is Executive Regional Director for the Department of Environment and Natural Resources for the Calabarzon region of Philippines. So thank you very much for joining us, Nilo and Vivi. It's a pleasure to have you. I'll be the moderator of the panel. My name is James Crawshaw, and I'm an analyst with Omdia. So I guess we're talking about environmental protection today. Many people have heard of the Paris Agreement on climate change and about the goals to limit the increase in global average temperature, but not so many people have heard about the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, or the 20 targets that it has for biodiversity conservation. So given that, why do you think people should care more about biodiversity? How do you think it will impact them and their families and their lives if exotic creatures disappear from the jungle? Perhaps we could start off with you, Vivi. What's your perspective on that?
Thank you. I'm really glad to be with you today. So I think the thing is like we try to put the topic of biodiversity as something outside you. So you cannot like imagine like what happened is it's gone, but biodiversity is something that already inside you. For instance, in our body, we have, trillion of bacteria. 1/3 of our body is made up of, the biodiversity of bacteria. Without that, we cannot function. Same for everything that make the environment and nature that are livable today. And biodiversity is also very important. If we think of something about our survival, it's food, right? So without the health of ecosystem, without the bee that pollinate the flower, we will not have food. So that is a basic, the first answer that I would urge everyone to stop thinking back. Biodiversity is right here.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. Nilo, well, why do you tell people that they should care more about environmental protection and biodiversity in particular? You're on mute, Nilo.
Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for the question. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources in the Philippines is the primary agency tasked to protect, preserve, and sustain the Philippine environment. Our mission for the Philippines is to mobilize our citizenry in protecting, conserving, managing the environment and the natural resources for the present and future generation. We need to care about biodiversity because it is an indicator of the health of our ecosystem. Our ecosystem sustains life on Earth. Trees help purify the air and mitigate climate change. Fish from the sea and rivers are food sources. Bees help pollinate fruit-bearing trees. Vegetation help maintain our soil for planting crops. Mangrove forests help protect us from surges and typhoons. Loss of biodiversity will have a devastating effect on human life. Loss of trees in the forest can bring landslide, flash flood to the lowland communities. Loss of fauna can give rise to pests like rats, locusts that can damage our crops, and continued hunting of exotic wildlife could mean extinction. Lives were lost, businesses gone because of devastation brought about by the loss of biodiversity.
Why should individuals, why should cultures, why should humanity care about biodiversity on a global scale? Well, I think that the biodiversity that we have today, that which we've come to be accustomed to, and that which our entire species evolved to take advantage of, there's really no evidence that we as a species can exist at any sort of degree of standard that we believe to be normal without that degree of life as it exists on Earth. Obviously, there's a lot of interconnectedness that occurs between species, and we should not take for granted the extent to which we are dependent upon that. At the same time, as individuals, as cultures, we're able to look out and see that so much of who we are is tied to this diversity of life on Earth. We are very inspired by this. We have a way by which we can connect to it, and it's very important that no one take that for granted. Look at your favorite elements of life, the things that inspire you the most in stories and culture, and you'll find that nature itself is tied to that. And this is nature that you don't necessarily see every day. But as conservationists, as scientists, as those who are that close to nature, it really is upon us. It's a challenge to us to make sure that anyone in the world can connect with what's there. So much of the world's population is in cities, and it's not difficult to understand why they would not be so connected to what's happening in nature. We have to make sure that the parts of nature that are hard to reach, hard to understand, hard to see, are more accessible to them. And so I think it's a dual challenge. First, we need people to open their minds and see that nature itself is of value to us, even if we don't necessarily see it every day. And it's a challenge to all conservationists and scientists out there to bring nature to people's lives and show how it matters to them on a personal, artistic, cultural, and ultimately survival scale.
Yeah, thank you, Nilo. Just to go back to you for a minute, Vivi, you're the Thailand Business and Biodiversity Network Alliance Manager. Could you just tell us a little bit, what is the Biodiversity Network Alliance?
Yeah, thank you. So the thing is, not many people have understanding about why biodiversity is important, especially the business sector. And maybe they are more familiar with, the climate change, the sustainable development goal. And you were right when you mentioned about not many people know about the CBD. So that's why we partner with Toyota 3 years ago. I mean, Toyota is the supporter of the update of the IUCN Red List. So they they thought that IUCN Red List 2 is very useful, and but it needs to be more easy to understand, accessible. So with that, we thought okay, we should also do something concretely for Thailand as well, starting from the business that already appreciate the value biodiversity. So we partner with Toyota to set up this platform so that company can join, become a member, and get a capacity training so that they will have better understanding about the biodiversity conservation. IUCN also provide the tools that they can use. And not only that, we also help identify the area where they are needed to be conserved, and we building up the thing called collaborative project, so that the private sector can make an investment that truly important and impactful for the nature. And this is quite a relatively new initiative. It's been going on for 3 years. And so far we have around 16 members of the business that part of the platform.
Okay, I see. Can you give us perhaps some concrete examples of what the Department for Energy and Natural Resources in the Philippines is doing to preserve biological diversity? How exactly are you protecting the environment in the Philippines?
The Department of Environment and Natural Resources has adopted several key strategies to preserve biological diversity and protecting environment, starting from the formulating of laws and policies for the environment, forest land use planning, agroforestry, adopting soil and water conservation measures, reaching out to local communities near the protected areas for advocacy and social mobilization, sponsoring coastal cleanups, capacity building of our own personnel, and working with organizations in adopting technology like our Lawin Forest and Biodiversity Protection System and Rainforest Connection pilot project in the Philippines, which uses technology to help protect the environment.
My organization, Rainforest Connection, in collaboration with Huawei and some other great partners around the world, we are focused on trying to protect and also to measure biodiversity. It's one thing to be able to say that by protecting the environment, in our case, rainforests, natural spaces, oceans, that you can protect biodiversity. But in order to really know that's the case, you need to measure it. And so our system, which is largely based on acoustics, listening to the sounds of nature, that is a very unprecedented and we believe least utilized way to see what's out there. When you're in nature, when you're in the forest, what you realize is that sound, the sound of the forest is the way in which life expresses itself, the way it asserts itself, the way in which there's so much depth to what's there. And so by listening 24 hours a day, passively, when no one's around, that's when the secrets and the ways in which nature expresses itself comes out. And by using AI to connect to this, to understand what's happening below the surface of sound, almost the ways in which our senses cannot pick up, and using AI plus large amounts of data, using big data techniques to pull out the ways in which nature itself is speaking to each other. That's what we can do in sort of measuring biodiversity. We do believe there's discoveries that have yet to be found within that. And we also believe this is one of the best ways for us to measure the improvement or decline of biodiversity over time. You are what you measure. You make what you measure. And if we are to improve biodiversity, first we have to understand what the baseline is over time. And that is our major contribution to the space.
Oh, so, okay, good examples. And Vivi, any particular examples about how the IUCN or the Biodiversity Network Alliance is helping to preserve biological diversity and protect the environments in Thailand?
So when we first start I would call it nickname BDNA platform, the name of the platform. So the first thing that we thought, like, how we can make biodiversity issue understandable for the private sector, right? So and that time the impact of marine pollution had growing really obviously, and like in that year in 2018 there was a whale, die, and the carcass was found on the southern of Thailand. It's a pilot whale, and when they opened the body they found 80 plastic bag, and that weight like 8 kilo. That was the main reason that killed the whale. And when they put the bag all together, they found that this plastic bag are from many countries. So we started with like, okay, there's some clear linkage, the impact of marine plastic pollution to the biodiversity. So then we start like, okay, what kind of activity that we can do together so that the staff, the company employee can really go there and see the real impact, right? So because of the BDNA platform was co-founded by Toyota. And Toyota, they have this activity like that they have done for 15 years to plant the mangrove in the coastal area in the Gulf of Thailand. So for that year, they said, okay, since we have the BDNA platform, let's do something special on top of just tree planting. So we mobilize all the employee of all the company member, 3,000 staff, to go to the mangrove area where you can find, I don't know, a kilometer, like very long, all the coastline inside the mangrove have a lot of plastic trapped inside, because, plastic come and they cannot go out because mangroves have really complex root system. And the thing is like, it's a shocking scene because you find everything inside the mangrove. You find the rubber tire, you find the bed, you find TV, you find toilet. I mean, everything you cannot imagine, and also thing that you can imagine, like all the thing like recyclable material. So to bring 3,000 people to that site is shocking, because normally people go to the beach, right? They do a lot of beach cleanup, but to go to the site where it never get clean is it's just like, it's mind blowing. So what was the success story is like they just like, when you go there, you physically in the mud collecting that thing. It's really change your perspective. It's hard to collect, and at the end everything is so dirty and then end up no value. So we have to bring all that plastic and all that trash to go to incineration, which is a waste of the resource, right? So what happened next is like the company then go back to their own company to review their single-use plastic policy, to improve and produce it media so that they can give to their employee better understanding about the impact of plastic to the environment. So that is like one simple step, one simple activity, but actually have impact to the company operation.
Interesting. And how do the people feel where they realize that a lot of this plastic, a lot of this rubbish is perhaps coming from overseas, coming from other countries, like the plastic bags you mentioned? Do they still just get down and get rid of the rubbish, or do they feel resentful about other countries' pollution?
Listen, I think they I mean, during that time in Thailand, what happened was then after the whale was killed, there was a more cases that the dugong, baby dugong also died from plastic bag. So people are actually more feel sorry for the environment or the bird, but anchor toward the other neighboring country, I think maybe not so much, because we are the ASEAN community, right? And just like the following year, Bangkok was the host of the Marine Debate Declaration for the first time. That all the 10 ASEAN member country kind of like pledged to tackling this issue seriously. And then I think Vietnam was rotating as a host.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And Nilo, you mentioned mangroves as well, and as being an important natural feature to preserve. What you said that they can help protect from storms, from typhoons. Is that right?
Yes, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources is open to collaborate with organizations that aims to protect the environment. Actually, today I just came from a half-day event where we mobilize our stakeholders in our goal to protect a certain forest area here in the province of Quezon, one with still the luscious forest cover. This morning, we had an event that culminated where we come together and collaborate in protecting the environment. Partnership and participation of the civil society is important, as well as those of the private sector. DNR have the policies, rules, and capability to apprehend and file cases for violators, but we need the cooperation of the community coupled with the aid of technology that would be really a challenge to further our capacity to protect the environment. We also appreciate the partnership with technology companies like Huawei to help protect the environment, and we are looking forward that the pilot project between the technology companies, specifically Huawei, would be mainstreamed in the DNR programs. We are hoping that we can still improve the technology so as to make it more effective and efficient as a tool for the protection of the environment.
Okay, interesting. So Nilo, what would be an example of using technology to protect the environment or preserve biological diversity? How can technology help?
The partnership with Huawei for this particular technology is an acoustic device that can capture sound, especially those sounds that are really threat to the environment, like the sound of the chainsaw or trucks. So in certain areas where the gadget is installed, within a certain radius, the acoustic device can capture the sound, and it is interpreted through the artificial intelligence. The interpretation of the artificial intelligence will be passed on to the gadget of our forest ranger, so we can easily respond by dispatching in the forest the different law enforcement agencies. The sound of those illegal activities in the forest can be captured through this technology and is very helpful. There is still room for improvement, and I hope that our project would improve so we could already mainstream it within the context of the policies of our department.
I see. So you mentioned chainsaws, so it's listening for illegal logging, and it's also listening for traps. Is that hunting or poaching?
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Well, and what sorts of animals would be poached in the Philippines or in your region?
There are a lot of wildlife that this particular technology is more on to catch the illegal loggers. The equipment used by the illegal loggers, when I say trucks, I mean the sound of these vehicles.
In terms of what sort of animals will be poached in a region, I think it's also important when we think of poaching, we think of it with regard to targeted species, whether it be animal or plant in case of trees. Illegal logging, which of course is one of our major focuses at Rainforest Connection, is also targeting certain species, mahogany, teak, these species that people will actually cut large swaths of forest down in order to get to. And of course, those species of trees are something that animals in the forest come to rely upon and expect to be there. So when they can go and remove, the entire population of certain tree species from an area, it can affect the animals as well. Areas that we focus on in Sumatra, Southeast Asia, Africa, they also find megafauna that are the target of poaching, and we do our best to help partners themselves monitor an area and know how to protect those species as well. Simply by protecting the borders of an area, you can, of course, fight poaching, and that's a major issue for us. We rely upon our local partners to tell us the species that they find to be most under threat, and then we will work with them to be able to track and detect those species based upon our technology. Of course, one of our first projects with Huawei several years ago began in Costa Rica by being able to track and protect spider monkeys. Spider monkeys are actively hunted by area people in the region for food, not so much poached for being for wildlife trade, but simply for food because they are actually something that the locals would eat. At the same time, the logging of large trees can affect the population as well. But interestingly enough, without the spider monkey in this area in Costa Rica, trees themselves cannot regrow. They are an important species for being able to spread the seeds around. So, one loss of one species that may in fact just not be perceived to be all that critical can affect the growth and the survival of the forest. And of course, it will always be the animals that make the most sense for bushmeat that are the most targeted in an area, if not for wildlife trade.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Got you. Interesting. And Vivi, do you have any examples of how technology can help with your nature protection in Thailand?
There's many technology that already in place. For example, like camera tab that have like a remote sensing. It's called NCAP. That if anything like they can detect and take a picture and send the data directly to the commands. But I think this technology is still expensive and it's also not accessible. So I think there's a big room for improvement, how to make all those technology cheaper and more accessible, because this thing is only happen just a pilot site here and there, not for all national parks. And I think there's also other technology that can be used with citizen side or something with technology with the social media, AI database and detection. I think there's this technology of the AI, right? Like there's some application called iNaturalist where you can download application, you take picture of animal, tree, plant, and they just tell you what is the species. And the more user, the more accurate this thing get, because there's a growing up professional people who also monitor to check if this data is accurate. And I think to have more technology like that is very useful, so that people, the non-biologists and non-conservationists can use and can access it. And when they have the tool and they can learn about nature, then they can also appreciate why it's important. Yeah.
At this point, all conservation efforts are ultimately tied to technology, because all human activity is tied to technology. There is no way that conservation will be able to persist and be better without using technology, just as those who are working against environmental protection are using the same. And it's been really a pretty amazing decade in terms of technological advances, everything from satellite imagery to camera traps to just the proliferation of smartphones and connectivity. This has changed the way that conservationists are able to work. But ultimately, we think that there's going to be a difference between what you can measure remotely, called remote sensing, what you can measure from a distance, and what you can measure being very much in the weeds. And so our contribution is really in acoustics. How can we use sound to measure not just what's happening right in front of your eyes, but all around you in the forest, yet beneath the canopy, or beneath the water, or in places that you can't actually access from cameras from a great distance. There's so much in that, and that I think is where we're going to see really rapid advances in understanding not just the threats to nature and how to protect it, but also the secrets of nature that may be changing right now. So that's our contribution in acoustics, and we do this as part of a large array of really exciting technologies that are converging on conservation, and not a moment too soon.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear. So I guess another question I had was, how do you think And let's go back to Nilo now. How do you think governments and NGOs, as well as local agencies, can collaborate together to better protect the environment and help deliver on these goals for sustainable development that the UN has? What's the best way for NGOs and governments to work together, do you think, Nilo?
The basic strategy for mobilizing the community is really collaboration. That's the practice of the DNR because the government alone cannot do the protection given the limited staff complement of the government. We really need partnership with our stakeholders, not just the people's organization or the community, because protecting the environment is not the sole domain of the government. So to ensure the delivery of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we really need the participation of the private sector, the non-government organization, local communities, and other government agencies. So I think that's the key to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations.
Yeah. And Vivi, do you have a perspective on that? How the NGOs and government agencies can work better together?
I think to answer that, I think we have to date back 50 years ago when was the term, the Sustainable Development defined, right? Because like seemed to be that the movement of the Sustainable Development was first happening among the UN agency and NGO, international development. And the United Nations for Environmental Program, or UNEP, was actually established 50 years ago. And like only in 1980, we have the world first, World Conservation Strategy. And that is what, mentioned a little bit for the concept. And, as it has grown and evolved, at a different, UN summit, or this year. And I think one of the things that kind of like get our generation getting to like be aware about the impact of, climate change and the need for sustainable development when they have this thing called the IPCC, right? The climate change report, the impact. And then they set this goal, the Millennium Development Goal, but that one was not popular somehow because I think at that time there's no Facebook, no social media, so people don't really, still know about this thing in the small group. We didn't see any big movement by major company or major business. But then in 2015, when they finally have, all the UN or the country endorse the Sustainable Development Goal, and they have this very nice branding, the logo, the color, the 17 goal, very clear, the target. Then you see more that like all the company, they're starting to like, yes, we contribute to Sustainable Development Goal. But we did the survey, okay, people know about it, but only like I think 70% of the CEO are aware about the SDG, but only 20% of them actually doing something to achieve that. So there's a huge gap to get there to achieve. And I think there's a latest report from the Cambridge that they just published. They did the ranking of how country achieve the goal. Thailand was like number 43 out of 160 countries something. And what's interesting is that the goal number 15, life on land, is actually declining. And then when I click down, like why this goal was declining, because Thailand did not do enough to protect the red species. So seem to be like there's like people maybe know a little bit above the surface, but they don't know exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 what exactly they need to do. And I think there's as Nilo said, there's need more collaboration with all stakeholders, because if you break down on the all 17 goals, they're clear like who should get involved, how policy that government should make so that the private sector is to shift to clean energy. This will be the law that needs to be changed, right? So I think the first step is that like the SDG knowledge should be taught at school as well. And also there should be some course or something, easy to digest and share with, all various sector. Thailand is doing well in progress because they also have the mapping exercise on how national strategy and action plan. We have like 20-year strategy, how it fit in to the SDG.
Okay, I see. Very, very good. Sustainable development goals. Wider understanding and education about them is key. Nilo,
can I, yes,
yeah,
sorry,
please.
can I add a little bit? Because the thing is like not many people like familiar about like what IUCN do, you know, because most people like know other organization, but IUCN is like the world largest environmental network, and like we work in many countries. And what makes IUCN unique is that we work with the, you know, with the membership. You know, we have the government member, we have the NGO member, and we also have the commission of like more than 15,000 experts around the world. And with the IUCN membership, we have more than 1,500 NGO organizations, our member. Yeah, so we also like, you know, a platform that can provide this role of, you know, helping different sectors to achieve the goal.
I think it's really important for all organizations in technology space as well as in the conservation space and the governmental space, the public-private partnerships that exist, to realize that we're all in this together. It's very easy to see the differences, the slight differences to what we do, but this is not a moment to shirk collaboration, to set it aside. It's a moment for us to accept that we are part of a puzzle. There is no platform, there is no single group, there's no one technology that is going to solve every problem. We all have to accept that we are part of a growing movement, and sort of being able to capitalize on each other and frankly boost each other up. It's very important that we understand that all conservation is local, and so on the technology scale and at the conservation scale and the international scale, we should be leveraging everything we have to help local groups deal with conservation. There is no global conservation in that sense. Global conservation only exists as a way to leverage and improve the extent to which local groups are able to do the work that's there, because there's local people on the ground who can make any difference, and we need them to be committed to this long term. Conservation is not a 1 year, 5 year, 10-year goal. It's ultimately a decades-long, centuries-long goal. Conservation that doesn't exist forever is not conservation. And so for us, we believe that that's the key.
Nilo, if I can just go back to you for a minute. Vivi was talking about, you know, the history of environmental protection going back. I'm sure it goes back more than 50 years. But do you think that things are now actually improving in the Philippines in terms of environmental protection? Are things getting worse, or have we reached a sort of steady state?
Environmental protection is really the main concern of the Philippine environment. Actually, the current administration so that given the broad mandate of the department, there are aspects that are left out. One of which is the effective environmental law enforcement as a main component of protection mandate. So the current administration is looking forward for the structural change within the department by creating the Environmental Protection Enforcement Bureau. Because of the broad mandate of our department, the environmental law enforcement has been left out, and it has an impact on the state of the environment and to the environmental defenders. By pushing for the structural reforms and creating the EPEB, which is now pending in both houses of Congress, coupled with the systems and technology and the paradigm shift of our department, then we could be assured that we can protect the environment and natural resources for the future generations.
Thank you. And Vivi, in your perspective, are things getting better, or are things still deteriorating in terms of our biodiversity and the environment from a Thailand perspective?
I think in terms of environmental situation, I think Thailand kind of like worse because we have severe air pollution now. I think in the past 3 years now, Thailand make like the top worst air pollution in the world, especially from Bangkok. And the result of that is, you know, multiple reasons from agriculture, from, they said it's impact from the burning from the Myanmar. So, but they said it's a company from Thailand that invests agriculture in the Myanmar that caused open burning. So there's a huge growing implication impact from the business and the development that are not sustainable, which is resulting in environmental health, you know, air pollution, water pollution. Just recently, last week, we have very bad, what you call algae boom, tidal, the boom in the Gulf of Thailand, and you know it's causing oxygen depletion. So I think there's a lot of challenges, but the government they're trying. I mean, on top of promoting the self-sufficient philosophy, and they have this brand new program called promoting the bioeconomy, circular economy, and green economy, hoping that in 20 years time Thailand will become achieve this goal toward the sustainable development. But I feel that there's so much the Thailand can do, and that the private sector in Thailand is very strong. So they should be the focus to help the Thai government too, because in terms of like a budget allocation for biodiversity conservation, there's a huge gap that's not enough. So I'm really pleased to see that like just last week Thailand launched this network called the Thailand Carbon Neutral Network, trying to promote, because we doesn't have law in place, but we want the company to voluntarily, committed to, have their carbon emission become neutral.
And the motivation for the companies to do this, is it so that they are seen more favorably in the eyes of the consumer? Is that the idea?
I think so, and I think the first thing is like most of the company operating in many countries, and they have to comply to the movement in Europe, to the Paris Agreement. So I think the first motivation may be like the compliance, but the second compliance is also that the growing awareness among the consumer too. Consumer prefer to support in the brand that doesn't have causing a negative impact to environment.
In a lot of our projects around the world, and we're active all over the world, one of the biggest issues you see in conservation is about law and order. The ability for governments, the ability for local groups to actually maintain order and justice in their areas. This is something that we don't find to be as big of an issue in the Philippines when you look at the commitment of DENR, we look at the commitment of local groups to be able to stop this. This is a country that has the ability to fight and potentially to control environmental crime in the areas that they choose to. And so we are very optimistic about the possibilities of being able to protect the last remaining wildernesses as they've committed to, using, of course, technology we have and so many more, and the will of the people that are there. So we're optimistic about what's in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it comes down to. I don't know if you agree, Nilo, but a lot of this is about the consumer at the end. If they have a choice between buying a product that's made with all sorts of sustainability in mind and protecting the environment, or a cheaper product from another company that's not adhering to those rules, they might choose the cheaper product. So we need to, perhaps there's way to legislate for compliance, but also it's about consumer awareness and consumers being prepared to pay a premium for products that come from companies that have got a better environmental track record. Would you agree, Nilo?
Yes, I agree. There are lots of adjustments that should be undertaken. We have to revisit our existing policies and attune to the challenge of the time. So if the present laws and ordinances is not or are not responsive to that direction, then revisiting, review, and amendment of such laws should be undertaken by the government. It took the Supreme Court of the Philippines calling the attention of the executive branch to exert effort in the enforcement of the existing laws, specifically the cleanup of Manila Bay. It took the Supreme Court mandating the 14 agencies of the Philippine government to address the water pollution that the Manila Bay is experiencing. And it's a continuing mandamus until the water quality has improved. Even with the existence of these laws, another challenge is how to enforce and implement it.
Okay, and what's the cleanup of Manila Bay? What was causing the pollution? Was it things that people had thrown into the bay? Was it material that was coming from the sea?
A lot of factors. One is the interconnectivity of septage system in the metropolis has never been addressed since time immemorial. Therefore, discharges of boats from the houses that runs directly to the bay, to the unregulated practices of some industries, shortchanging the compliance of the existing laws, also adds up. The presence of informal settlers along the waterways which transform the waterways as their toilet. Those waterways drains to the bay. The continuing mandamus done by the Supreme Court was way back 2008. Because it is a continuing, the cleanup of Manila Bay is still ongoing until the Supreme Court finds the quality of water complying with the standard, which is SB quality or swim and bath quality of water.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Thank you. Vivi, you mentioned earlier about plastic bags and whales eating plastic bags and then dying. I saw a documentary recently called Seaspiracy. I don't know if you've seen this one. And it was a guy who was exploring the issue of plastic straws. There's been a lot of awareness amongst consumers about moving away from plastic straws and using paper straws instead. But actually what he found through his research was the vast majority of the plastic that's out there in the ocean comes from the fishing industry. So I'm just wondering, what work are you doing in Thailand to make the fishing industry more aware of the impact of their practices, any sort of nets that get broken and thrown into the sea, because of course they can be a huge danger for marine life.
Thank you. This movie, when it come out, it gained a lot of popularity around the world and also raised a lot of controversy. I think Thailand also one of the scene there where yeah. So there's some information there that is good for the discussion. And it's so true, like by weight of the amount of weight that found in the marine debris, fishing gear was the one that is like the most found, and it also kill a lot of like marine animal as well. Just recently, there was a smaller island in the deep south of Thailand. The diver who go for just a tourist diver, they found a big big fleet of abandoned fishing gear cover the coral, and that is very good condition for coral. So the Thai government mobilized work with the navies and volunteer diver to conduct this called retrieval operation. And the thing is, we have the project that we collaborate with the recycler. And also there's another organization, Environmental Justice Foundation, have a program called Net Free Sea, where they're trying to create the circular economy from the used net, the net that been found from the sea. So we also made that option available as well. But the thing is, the fish, most of the fishing gear was found discarded. So they're from two reasons, right? One, that they were discarded not intentionally. Maybe it was lost with the fishing, take place and then broke the net. And sometimes the fishermen just trash it because it's broken and it's no value, so that they don't bring it back to sell. So there's a lot of action need to be addressed that, because right now there's no the tagging of the device was not in place yet, and the value for the net that retrieve back, like if you found the net in the sea or the net rope on the shore, the value is not so much, so there's no incentive for the people to collect or bring it back. So that is a project that we're trying to build on, to create incentive for the ocean marine debris, so that people can earn extra income from that and also raising awareness. So we have two pilot sites working on this in the South Thailand, in Ranong and in Krabi.
On a personal level, I appreciated the issues that were brought up in the documentary Seaspiracy. I do believe that it's important for us all to recognize the outsized effect that eating meat, whether it be beef, chicken, or fish, can have on the environment, and the extent to which this may not be sustainable at the levels that we're currently maintaining it. At the same time, the only way to address this is not necessarily by condemning the fact that seafood and fisheries themselves are critical parts of the economy of so many coastal regions, so many cultures around the world, and there is no solution to cleaning this up without their involvement. So eradicating fish from one's diet or any diet on a global scale, of course, is not going to happen soon. But I think it's really important that people are bringing this up, And I think it's important to point out that the extent to which we are amassing huge amounts of extraction from the sea is not sustainable and must be reformed in the style and with agreement and collaboration of local fisheries that can come from long-standing cultures in these areas. So I look forward to seeing what we can pull out of that. I also think it's very important to point out that the law and order issue that was mentioned earlier, as it relates to fisheries in the world and the open ocean, one of the biggest issues of conservation, whether it be in the ocean, whether it be in the forest, whether it be anywhere else, is about law and order. On the open seas, there is none of this. There is no governing body, and so it is entirely up to sort of standards upon which we can change things via trade. The standards of oversight that have to do with how things are bought and sold. And so this, of course, is brought up in the documentary. It's a very good point, but I wish that there was a bit more talk around solutions around trying to impose that, because where there is no law and order, you only have the pressures of the market itself. And so I hope that there's ways in which we can all contribute to monitoring the seas and the animals within them and how we extract products from the sea in a much more transparent way.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So, Nilo, if we go back to you for a minute, can you see any uses for technology to help with this, and sort of maybe policing the fishing industry and making sure that their practices are in line with with the standards? Perhaps satellite technology could be used to track, because at the moment, obviously, fishing fleets, when they're out in the ocean, nobody knows what they're doing. So they obviously can cut corners if it helps to save their costs. So are there any technological solutions that you can see that might help here?
Definitely, the technology would really help. Technology is being used for destruction. The corresponding technology would be the agenda of the day. There are lots of innovation that could be put up, that could put up the appropriate methods for sustainable fishing practices or whatever activity within the water system. The aid of technology systems and the use of the satellites would really help in ensuring that practices are sustainable, with the end of view of protecting the remaining natural resources we have.
Just the same as monitoring the forest, just the same as monitoring anything on land, the first step towards being able to protect marine biodiversity comes with monitoring, being able to understand what's there, measure what's there. Interestingly enough, under the water, there is just as much noise, and acoustics can be used to monitor fish, can be used to monitor shrimp and crustaceans, can be used to monitor, of course, whales and cetaceans. And so for us, the Rainforest Connection, we are trying to make it easier and lower cost for anybody to be able to monitor what's under the water and make the most of that data. So this, of course, is for us the next step. Marine protected areas are very important, but again, because they're on the high seas, there is no order that leads to them being protected. So I think that monitoring and standards upon which we measure that which is extracted and the way in which it makes its way into the market, that's the way by which you can protect the natural world, while at the same time all getting on board with the fact that we need to understand the diversity and the concentrations and, frankly, the ways in which life itself exists under the sea, because it's changing very rapidly before our eyes and ears.
And Vivi, just to go back to the topic of biodiversity, is it declining in Thailand, biodiversity? Are we losing animals, or have you managed to stabilize the situation?
Yes and no. In general, the species is declining, but there's some good news on the flagship species like the tiger. I mean, in the Western Forest Complex, there's because of the strong protection area, the number of the feline, the tiger is increasing. But there's also like other species like the one that outside the protected area, that when they doesn't have enough data, they are facing more like exposure from the threat from the changing of the land use. I can give example of the fishing cat. The fishing cat look like a cat, but like a smaller tiger. It's very, very cute, but their habitat is on the wetland. And most of those wetlands already been converted to residential areas or agriculture. So I mean, it's listed in the IUCN Red List as a vulnerable species, but there's actually not really strong mechanism to really like deal with how we're going to do when this species coming out to the resident area. People still kill them because there's no law protect that species. So it's an ongoing effort to protect the species that are not really protected by the law, but they are vulnerable. And, and you will see now there's rising conflict between human and animal. In Thailand, we have a lot of conflict with like the elephant because the forest is fragmented, and population also they come out from the forest to foraging in the agricultural area. There's an increasing number of the monkey, causing the community around fear for the ladies and conflict with the otter. So there's many flagship species that they have niche population here, but their habitat in terms of forest natural resources is like shrinking. So they causing conflict with the people who doesn't really understand their role in environment.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And Nilo, just to go back to you for a moment. Biodiversity in the Philippines, is it deteriorating? Are there species that you're losing, or again, have you managed to arrest the decline?
This is one of the most megadiverse countries in the world. We are the center of marine biodiversity. We are at the center of the coral triangle where the rich marine biodiversity are present. We have a lot of wildlife species that can only be found in the Philippines. But this biodiversity is threatened. We have a lot of species that are already in different categories: threatened, extinct, vulnerable. Added to that is the entry of exotic or introduced species that has an impact in the biodiversity of the Philippines. Those are the challenges that the country faces. We are currently in the process of amending the Wildlife and Conservation Act to really strengthen government policy on how to conserve and protect the remaining indigenous species in the Philippine biodiversity.
Great. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our panel discussion on environmental protection. Just remains for me to thank our panelists, Kun Siriporn Sriaram, Thailand Business and Biodiversity Network Alliance Manager with the International Union for Conservation of Nature in Thailand. Thank you, Vivi, for joining us today. And Nilo Tamuria, Executive Regional Director with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources for the Calabarzon region of the Philippines. Thank you, Nilo, for joining us today, and thank you to our audience for listening in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tech for a Better Planet Symposium. We're going to be having a panel discussion about green technology. I'm joined today by Yondine Sherpa from the ITU, who looks after e-waste policy and is a technology consultant. We have David Liu Kilin, President of Strategy Marketing Department with Huawei Asia Pacific region. Sheila Vergara, who's Director of Biodiversity Information Management for the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. Matt Wilson, Insights Director with Climate Tech at the GSMA. And Melissa Virgil de Dios, who is the VP and Head of Sustainability for PLDT, the Philippine Telecom Operator. I'll be your moderator today. My name is James Crawshaw. I'm an analyst with Omdia, an industry research firm. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you and to discuss this very important topic. I think most people would agree that climate change is real. I think we've had some recent evidence across the world of extreme climate events, and also that it's being caused by humans. Most people will support efforts to try and reduce greenhouse gas emissions because ultimately it's in our own self-interest, or perhaps it's just concern for how the climate change might affect the lives of our children or our grandchildren. But climate change is seen as less important by some, particularly those that perhaps living in urban societies. Why should we be more aware about the impact of climate change? And also, how do you think digital technology can help? So those are the opening questions. Perhaps we could start off with you, David. What's your perspective on climate change and the role for digital technology?
Okay, so thank you, Brother James. So actually, for that, global climate governance is gaining traction. So climate and environmental changes, more and more natural disasters have become a huge challenges for the survival and the development of human society. It has become a consensus to accelerate a green and a new carbon way of life and production, protect the nature and the biological environment, and promote the green recovery of the economy after the pandemic. So energy is the foundation of the digital world. The future for global energy will be no carbon, electrical, and digital. So using technologies to effectively convert, store, and control electric energy and continuously improve digitalization level is an important way to help create a no carbon world. From the perspective of the ICT industry, so Huawei have been committed to use less energy to transmit, process, and store more information. So taking 5G as an example, so the energy consumption per bit is only about 1/10 of the 4G. So this is a big achievement. ICT, digital technology, while reducing energy consumption and carbon emission in its own industry, also serves as an enabling technology to help other industry to save energy and reduce emission. Huawei combines digital and electrical technologies to transform the energy network through digital technology, make data a key production factor of the energy internet, manage watts with bits, and optimize energy flow with data streams to make the power network more intelligent, reliable, green, and efficient. Huawei focuses on clean power generation, transportation electrification, green ICT infrastructure, smart energy storage, and other fields. So based on experience in the power, electric energy storage fields, combined with 5G cloud, AI, and other technologies, so advantages are integrated and innovated to provide low carbon and even zero carbon energy solution for the industry. So in Asia Pacific, we complete multiple intelligent photovoltaic projects and provided a total of 18 gigawatt inverters and contributed to the successful grid collection, which was equivalent to reducing carbon dioxide emission more than 12.8 million tons. So in Switzerland, farms use 5G plus AI technologies to enable automatically identify harmful weeds, reduce the use of herbicide, which improve farms' efficiency more than 20% and reduce mechanical working time. So let technology and nature coexist. Let people live in harmony with nature and continue to promote green and sustainable development. The advancement of science and technology while promoting green economic development can also help mankind better understand and protect nature, reduce the impact of human activities on nature, and make our environment better. Thank you, Jim.
Great. No, thank you, David. Very, very comprehensive answer. Yondine, I'd be interested to get your perspective as a member of the ITU, the industry standards body for the telecom industry. What sort of work are you doing in this area that can contribute to the issue of climate change?
Thank you. So just for your question before and as well as the one right now, I would say that there is a consensus in the urgency of climate change, but the coordination problem that this holds is gigantic. And there's a lot of relevant stakeholders and decision makers involved, but there is a lack of understanding of the extent of consumer choice and behavior in further contributing to climate change. ITU works on climate change and mitigation in general, as well as in particular from their study groups. In particular, study group 7, for instance, deals with science services and systems for remote sensing and space applications, which give us vital data on the Earth and its atmosphere and help us study and monitor climate change, which is crucial, this kind of information, and also helps us assist and predict the weather and monitor and predict natural disasters in that regard. But today I'll be talking more from an e-waste standpoint because that is what my research lies in, and that's what I'll be focusing today. So the total weight of, electronics and electrical equipment consumption, it increases by 2.5 million tons every year, and this is driven in part by higher disposable income, as well as the consumer's tendency to want the new things, the new iPhone, the new smart fridge, etc. This means that more electronic waste is produced when these reach their end of life or end of functionality for the consumer. And this also raises the question of proper disposal. And as the fastest growing waste stream in the world, the global generation of e-waste is projected to grow to 73.7 metric tons by 2030. And this is problematic because improperly discarded e-waste can release hazardous substances and toxic additives such as mercury, chlorofluorocarbons, which have negative effects on health and adverse consequences for the environment, of course, including contributing to climate change. For instance, improperly discarded fridges and air conditioners alone released about 98 metric tons of CO2 equivalents in 2019. And in this regard, in 2019, only 17.4% of the total e-waste that was generated was documented as properly collected and recycled around the world, which is an alarmingly small number, and it is low even in developed societies and developed e-waste systems like in the EU, for instance. And this brings us back to the consumers. So for consumers, research identifies that convenience, financial cost, or incentives are a large determinant of consumer participation in this regard. Some of the most obvious digital solutions for consumer awareness include online platforms for information access, which there are plenty, both government and private sector led. But the innovation that is now coming up informs consumers, as well as it also aims to change consumer behavior, which is what we need. For instance, the Internet of Things, or the IoT, allows service providers to track how their product is being used, of course, operating under secure data privacy laws. But the big data that is created can be analyzed to model consumer behavior and produce targeted strategies for policy making. For instance, the use of QR codes or blockchain tracing can be explored for consumers to be able to access information on their electronics by just a quick scan to see the value chain of the product, how the materials have been sourced, etc. And this is a way for consumers to get agency and make their choices heard to the producers, for instance. Apps are another thing that are huge for convenience, with Uber for waste collection kind of growing in popularity, where the user just puts in the e-waste and then can see how much value they can get for it, and then also arrange a pickup that is convenient for them. So, this adds the thing of functionality, convenience. And then finally, incentivization solutions are also picking up traction, where you can take your electronic waste, go to a smart bin, submit your electronic waste, and then get some kind of automatic electronic coupon or online token system which you can later exchange for some kind of commodity. So then this also brings in incentivization. So digital solutions do have a lot of promise when it comes to really mobilizing consumers and giving them agency as well. So yeah, I think in terms of e-waste and consumer management, getting to consumers, digital solutions can be a really vital tool.
Interesting. Just a quick follow-up, Yondine. Are mobile phones a major problem as a major contributor to e-waste, or are they a
Yeah.
relatively small part of the?
No, gigantic. ICT equipment make up a huge part of electronic waste, and smartphones in particular, with the proliferation of networks, different technologies, etc. We have producers here as well. So this is mobile phones is a huge problem, especially with the take, make, waste kind of model where, you just keep choosing the next mobile phone. So definitely that is a huge issue.
Okay, interesting. Matt, from the GSMA, I'd be interested to get your perspectives. Do you think that the telecom industry overall is a contributor to the problem of climate change? All that electricity that's consumed, all of the CO2 that's released to make that electricity, or do you think that communication services are helping to make society more energy efficient and actually help to combat climate change?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a lot that digital technology can do. I think that on one hand, there's a lot of opportunity for the mobile industry to think about how they impact climate change and to set science-based targets and net zero ambitions to reduce their own emissions. In my job, the thing that we find really exciting and a really interesting opportunity is to explore the role that digital technology can play to enable other industries or government partners or the development sector to take climate action, whether that's climate mitigation or adaptation or to build climate resilience. So I think there's lots of interesting ways that the industry can do that. One of the opportunities that we have been looking into recently is around natural resource management and supporting the management and the protection of resources such as forests, watersheds, oceans, animal species. And these are the types of resources that work together to provide us with what we need to survive with our food, our medicine. They regulate our climate, they improve the quality of our water and our air. They even protect us from natural hazards. And I think some of our recent research on this topic has been really exciting. So for instance, we've seen that technology has a really critical role to play in how these resources are protected and managed. They can support community engagement and participation in natural resource management activities. They're allowing organizations to collect and monitor data better and in near real time. They're allowing organizations to store and analyze and visualize data. So I can talk more about this later if we want, but building on what we were just talking about, I also think there's an opportunity for digital technology and the mobile industry to make the challenge of climate change more compelling and to close this action gap between what we know we have to do to address climate change and what we're already doing. And building a bit on what Jan Dina said, I think there's two ways that we can do that. In my team, we try to make the climate narrative a bit more compelling by making sure that when we conduct research, we do it in a way that's human-centered. And by that, I mean, we want our readers, the consumers of our research, to understand the experience and perspectives of people who are most impacted by climate change. And I think this makes the issue more personal. It helps illustrate the benefits in a really tangible way of what taking action will achieve or what solutions we'll need to do to address this problem. So that's one opportunity, to leverage digital technology so that we can connect with the local people who are impacted by climate change, to share their experiences and give them a voice, and also to use our digital platforms to tell an effective story that can address consumer apathy. And then again, building on what Jan Dina said, I think the second opportunity is for technology to connect people with information and advice on what they need to do to address climate change or to become more resilient to its impacts. In many of the places where we work, the impact of climate change is already quite clear. If you're a farmer living in Kenya and Sri Lanka, this is top of mind already. You don't need to be motivated to want to do something about climate change. You just need better access to information about how to take action. And we've been working on the issue of plastics collection and recycling. And when we spoke to plastic recycling organizations, they said what they need in order to achieve scale is to connect with consumers and influence their knowledge of and their behaviors towards recycling. So they need to know why it's an important environmental and climate issue, but also how to recycle efficiently. And as Yandine said, sometimes even get rewards for recycling. And that can be done through really basic text messaging to share information about what types of materials can be recycled, or it could be a smartphone app that allows consumers to book collection services. And during the pandemic, just to close, during the pandemic, we've seen mobile operators all over the world working with governments and community organizations to share actionable information and advice about the symptoms of COVID or the importance of social distancing or other measures to reduce its spread, or to inform where to be vaccinated. And I think in the same way, MNOs, mobile operators, are in a great position to explore opportunities to drive better awareness and help people take action on climate change.
Very good. Yeah, the impact of climate change is not just being felt in agricultural communities or the developing world. We've seen recently the floods in Germany, the heat wave in North America. It's affecting very much the entire planet. Hopefully, a catalyst for change. Melissa, let's be interested to get your perspective as a telecom operator, as a company that's beholden to its shareholders rather than an industry standards body or a consortium of mobile operators. What is Philippine long distance telecom, was the old name for the company, PLDT. What's your perspective about climate change and what your role is in combating it?
All right. Let me start maybe by giving some background on the Philippines to provide context to my answer. The Philippines is very rich in natural resources, so it has a lot of flora and fauna, extensive coastlines, lots of forest area, mineral deposits. But because of its location, it's also exposed to a lot of natural calamities like earthquakes and typhoons. And what we've seen in recent years is, as a result of climate change, we've had stronger and stronger typhoons and the consequent floodings, similar to what was experienced in Germany, higher temperatures and periods of drought or El Nino, which negatively impacts even our water supply. And then in terms of a socio-economic profile, about a fifth of the Philippine population are poor. So I guess part of your question is that in urban societies, they don't care about the environment or leaving something for their children. I guess if in the case of the poor, they're not thinking beyond the next meal. So that's something that needs to be addressed as well. Now, so you have a country that's rich in natural resources, vulnerable to natural calamities, and a fifth of the population that's poor. Why is it important, therefore, to increase awareness about climate change? Because it affects us directly. And how then can technology be used to magnify climate change? We can do that in several ways. So I think education to spread awareness. What the pandemic has done in the Philippines is that it kind of highlighted the role that digital connectivity can play in education. Face-to-face classes have been disallowed nationwide for the last 18 months. Learning has been done at home. So that also gives us an idea that we can spread education using online technology and learning modules. And then even the use of social media, which is very popular in the Philippines, can be a tool for spreading information about climate change and the importance of climate change. As we've done in several projects, one in fact with Huawei, we can use technology and connectivity to enable the monitoring of protected areas such as mangroves, peatlands, rainforests, and maybe we can go into that in detail later on in the panel. We've also used connectivity for disaster preparedness and response. So when there's an oncoming typhoon or a volcano about to erupt, we're able to pre-position network equipment and personnel to be able to respond very quickly in case of calamity. And we provide the local government units with satellite phones, for example, that enable people to communicate with each other. So it helps, I guess, response and relief and recovery to happen. During the pandemic, maybe as Matt alluded to earlier, a lot of the telcos around the world having been very useful in spreading information about COVID. In fact, in the Philippines, PLDT and SMART played key roles in providing communication connectivity for several COVID facilities and hospitals, the local government units and government agencies, and even powering up the central command where people kind of monitor where the facilities are available. And then I guess in relation to the fact that a fifth of the population is poor, we can use digital technology to enhance livelihood. We have within our group an e-commerce payments platform that we can use to expand markets which are basically limited to the local communities. If you're able to use technology to expand those markets beyond their physical borders, then you address one of the reasons why they would destroy a peat, for example, or why they would cut some trees. So if we're able to use digital technology, that also helps, I guess, relieve part of the problem. Finally, in operating our own business, we're working towards reducing our own carbon footprint. So we're using lower emissions technology like carbon fiber towers, fuel cell technology, upgrading copper lines to fiber, and the use of electric vehicles for our fleet. So I guess that's kind of several cases of the use of technology to help combat climate change.
Okay, interesting. There was one thing I didn't quite catch. You said that you would try and help better inform people so that they didn't need to cut a tree or to destroy a pit.
Yeah, a peat in the peatlands. So yeah.
Yeah.
So when people don't have source of income, they resort to clearing the peatland so that they can plant to augment their income. Because maybe that local community in particular sell jam and slippers, right? But if the pandemic limits them and accessibility and mobility, then they have no source of income. I guess what we kind of encountered during the pandemic is there was a lot of home-based businesses that used online e-commerce platforms for to market their products beyond what is reachable by foot. And expanding that market. So if we're able to do that for that local community where the peatlands exist, then we can provide livelihood so that they don't have to resort to destroying nature to get their next meal from. So yeah.
I see. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Really interesting. Okay, so that brings us on to our next question. And as part of the effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, particularly CO2. Essentially, we need to move our energy source away from fossil fuels and to alternatives, to renewable alternatives, whether that's to produce electricity or to power vehicles. So I'd be interested to know what the panelists think about how digital technology can help in this. Are there any particular methods or technologies that you think are most apt? If we can start off with Yondine from the ITU.
I think in regards to your question, and when I think about trying to bring in again the electronic waste perspective, I think when it comes to nature conservation, something I want to bring up is more of the sourcing of raw materials, because that is also very relevant to your question. And in terms of nature conservation, and speaking from an e-waste perspective, circularity is really key. The current linear economic model is very unsustainable and super vulnerable to economic shocks from the disruption of resources, as we saw in the COVID-19 pandemic. And the finite nature of raw materials and the environmental effects of extracting them is also coupled with escalating consumption, as well as lack of proper resource recovery from the eventual e-waste. And this also is tangential to your points of energy efficiency and the extraction of fossil fuels, etc. So there is a pressing need for systems change towards a circular model that designs out waste and pollution and is intentionally regenerative. So in the mining and the metals industry, digital transformation has been estimated to create about $320 billion of value for the industry. And using digital technologies can provide services to improve and innovate designs for the materials, accelerate efficiency gains in the supply chain, reduce error stoppages, and also increase transparency and traceability. For instance, in the raw materials, and sorry, I want to focus on raw materials here. The sourcing phase. So, for instance, artificial intelligence has been explore to accelerate the research of finding new alloy formations, for instance, for less resource usage and more product performance, which inherently means less raw materials used. Similarly, down the value chain, when it comes to things like materials passport, for instance, which allows the sharing of information from the producers all the way to the recyclers. This is also another way for recyclers to be kind of informed on the best way to recover resources. So always thinking about that circularity where, you know, the resources recovered then feeds back into the supply chain, and really inherently like understanding that that the supply of raw materials and in your case as well, like fossil fuel is limited, and there needs to be some sort of sustainable and circular system in place. So the whole system needs to change, and digital transformation is a huge catalyst in that regard. So I'm not sure I directly answered your question, but I definitely want to bring in the e-waste perspective when it comes to
well, no, absolutely. I can see that there is a strong e-waste perspective here, or a waste perspective anyway. So certainly with wind turbines and solar panels, they have a finite life. You know, solar panels, typically it's around 20 years. And recycling those materials is very hard. So there are initiatives or technologies that are looked at as alternatives to silicon-based solar modules, organic solar cells, for example, that don't require as many dangerous chemicals to manufacture, and also are much easier to recycle the end products. There's less e-waste with organic solar cells than with traditional silicon solar cells, but it's still very much a niche market. The vast majority of solar cells today are silicon based. I don't know if you've looked at that, or the wind turbines themselves. You know, a lot of steel there that's manufactured, and then that's hard to recycle as well.
Yeah, if I can just add quickly. So yeah, when we're talking about energy, you know, like fossil fuel and trying to diversify, for instance, we don't think about the electronic waste or the waste ramifications of those as well, because that solar panels itself produce gigantic amount of waste, and then that also creates a whole issue about, you know, how we dispose of that in a way that is sustainable and does not create harm to the environment, for instance. So yeah, definitely all of these considerations, even solutions have issues. So it's a huge interconnected kind of issue here. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Yondine. Matt, I guess what can the telecom industry bring to bear on this issue about transitioning from fossil fuel-based energy to greener energy? I mean, obviously they can do it themselves, and many of them have done or are committing to move to renewable energy for all of their energy requirements. But also, can they help to make this transition faster for the wider economy?
Also, I was making sure I was off mute. Yeah, it's a good question. There are a couple of things that our team is looking into. The first, which relates to renewable energy, is thinking about the climate impact of mobile towers that are off-grid. And by that, I mean they're not connected to the electricity at all, or they're connected to a bad grid, which means for most of the day or all of the day, they're running on diesel power. And we recently published a report on this topic, and we found that nearly half of all the towers in sub-Saharan Africa and around 16% of the towers in South and Southeast Asia are still categorized as either off-grid or bad grid, and are therefore running on diesel power. So we're trying to think about what kind of resources or advice or connections we can provide to the mobile industry to help them make that transition from running on bad grid or on diesel power to renewable energy. We have a renewable energy dashboard that helps provide information on over 70 countries on the status of off-grid and bad grid mobile towers, and some practical information about who mobile operators can partner with to make that transition to renewable energy. And then as I was starting to say before, there's also a real opportunity for the industries to support better management of natural resources, which provide climate mitigation by absorbing carbon emissions. And as I said, there's a real opportunity to play this enabling role where digital technology can support the way that governments and climate organizations engage with communities to better protect natural resources like forests, or enable data to be collected and analyzed. And in our report that we published last year, it's called Digital Dividends in Natural Resource Management. We included lots of interesting case studies that highlight how these digital technologies can do this sort of thing. And it includes a case study on Huawei's Rainforest Guardian project, which we found really interesting, really innovative and forward thinking. And one of the things that we found is that these types of projects can really be transformative if you combine multiple types of technology. So it could be different types of data collection methods. So for instance, monitoring forests using satellite, but also mobile apps on the ground, which of course rely on connectivity, or thinking about how to use one type of technology to do one function, such as collecting data, and another type of technology to analyze and derive useful insights from that. And the important thing that I would want to mention on this call is that we found that when an initiative receives support from a technology organization, whether that's a mobile operator or an organization like Huawei, it's much more likely to find opportunities to pair technologies and twice as likely to leverage emerging technologies like connected devices, blockchain, and IoT. And I think this underscores the really critical role that the private sector can play in this area, but also shows why initiatives like Huawei's Tech for All program or Microsoft's AI for Earth initiative are really important in that they help facilitate win-win partnerships between governments and nonprofits and provide partners with access to technical skills and resources and digital expertise, which most organizations have told us is much more valuable than receiving funding. So at GSMA, we're really excited by opportunities to connect to the private sector and technology organizations with organizations that are protecting natural resources and finding opportunities to curb climate change.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Matt. I mean, you touched there on biodiversity, and I guess we could ask about how digital technology can help with nature conservation, and that would be a great point to turn to Sheila from the ASEAN Centre for Biodiversity. We haven't had given you the chance to speak yet, Sheila, so apologies for that. But what's your perspective about the role that digital technology can play in biodiversity and helping with nature conservation?
Thank you, James. Similar to the concerns raised by the other panelists who spoke before me, we should be made more aware and understand the impacts of climate change on the health of people, and not only in this region, but also, globally. ACB's interest is in digital technology that can help by making tools and biodiversity information available to as wide an audience as possible, lots of stakeholders. IoTs through websites that create new information from existing data can help make information available, such as on species, including animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, especially those that are threatened. One example is the ASEAN Biodiversity Dashboard. You can find it in dashboard.aseanbiodiversity.org, which visualizes species distributions, where species can be found, their habitats, where conservation has happened, and where it is best to implement future conservation action. So it's important to have this data in place so that management plans and on-the-ground actions could happen. So in this dashboard, we add layers of data as it becomes available. I think data harvesting has been mentioned by Matt earlier also. ACB is also interested in digital technology that is applied to biodiversity conservation in areas that matter. For example, areas where species aggregate, and maybe these areas can be found elsewhere in other parts of the world. So there's need to conserve them. The terminology here is key biodiversity areas, and these are defined as areas critical to the persistence of biodiversity. At current, there's such a website such as the World Database on Key Biodiversity Areas, and it's called usually the WDKBA. Not all of these sites are protected yet, but if all policymakers are aware of this digital resource and consequently make the connection to the need of conserving these key biodiversity areas, their policy actions could make a big contribution to nature conservation. So in most of the minds of people, conservation work is frequently related to the establishment and maintenance of protected areas, right? And in these areas, conservation can only happen if the resources, such as the species and their habitats, are conserved in their natural state. So digital technology through the use of camera traps and sound recorders collect the necessary information on the presence of species, maybe also the absence of species if you're looking for them, and can give an indication of their habits, whether they are nocturnal or you can find them during the day, the fluctuations in their populations, the state of their habitats, and also information on the people who reside in or in close association to these protected areas, people who draw their incomes from resources within protected areas. And all of this data could inform the development of conservation strategies, zoning within the protected areas, establishing the limits of these protected areas, and also how you can collaborate with the stakeholders that are living in these protected areas. The use of LiDAR, it's a detection system which works on the principle of radar but uses light from a laser, and drones also could increase the resolution of observations and may even be useful in monitoring illegal harvests and related acts. There's a paper by Van der Waal and Arts, and it presents the range of conservation action that can benefit from the digital technology. And these are in the fields of restoration. Actually, I think it's the UN decade now for restoration, and that would be maybe interesting to other members in the panel here. Large data harvesting and analysis. So people want to see visuals of graphs and maps, and also to support conservation governance, how local governments can be more responsible in terms of local action, and promoting the sustainable use of natural resources. They refer to an umbrella term, digital conservation, and makes use of digital technology also in monitoring, digital public engagement, citizen science, crowdsourcing, e-learning, data connectivity, and decision-making support. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Sheila. Very, very comprehensive answer. Melissa, I wonder if PLDT has any involvement in these sorts of nature conservation programs, or alternatively, going back to the previous topic, you mentioned that you were using electric vehicles in your fleet. I just wondered how easy it is to buy renewable energy for your operations as well. So interested in your perspectives on either of those, including the nature conservation topic, if that's relevant.
Yes. Well, we have two specific examples where we are using digital technology, basically the smart mobile network and our data center for cloud storage for the data. We have a rainforest connection partnership with Huawei, the local Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and a US-based NGO Rainforest Connection. How that works is the what they call bioacoustics. So the sound of the forest is detected and recorded, and then maybe the difference in sound is used to detect illegal logging and poaching activities in the area. And that data is basically fed to the rangers or the local law enforcement and the local communities so that the illegal loggers can be apprehended. Similar to what Sheila also said, part of that information is also used for detecting the sounds of the forest to determine what kind of animals live in the area and what their behaviors are. So that's in Palawan. And then we have another project with another equipment vendor, Ericsson, where they use an Internet of Things solution and wireless connectivity to capture data for the survival of mangroves. In this particular case, there's data gathered about water level, humidity, soil moisture, and temperature. And then the data is transmitted over a cloud to a dashboard using SMARTS network. So those are two specific projects. I think then we have one that maybe doesn't use technology to the same extent, but I thought it was worth mentioning. We have a partnership with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to conserve the peatlands in Agusan del Sur. So the peatlands is a carbon sink. This particular one is about over 5,000 hectares, and it kind of holds an estimated 23 million tons of carbon, which would otherwise have been released into the atmosphere, right? So it's something that we're working to conserve together with the government. The original project involved PLDT providing communication, education, public awareness to conserve the peatlands. But I think, as we mentioned earlier, part of the local community in the area basically resort to destroying the peatlands, the peat, if they needed to supplement their livelihood. So we're trying to see how we can introduce livelihood projects to be able to help conserve those peatlands. So I think those are three kind of major projects that we had. And in a recent meeting, the DNR, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, basically wanted to expand the project to include the documentation and monitoring of fauna in the area as part of the biodiversity management. So I guess there's a lot of cases where very simple technology like mobile networks and data center, cloud storage, which is very close to our business, is actually being used to enable the preservation of the environment. Now, to your question on green vehicles, it's early days for us and early days for the Philippines. We just started with an order of something like 10 vehicles, but we're trying it out because part of our scope 1 emissions is really our use of fuel for our vehicles. So we're fortunate within the broader group of companies that we belong to, there is a distribution utility who is actually spearheading electronic vehicle usage, importation of electronic vehicles, building the charging stations in the Philippines. So though early days, we're starting to take a look at it, see how we can kind of refleet and change the mix of our vehicles to include more and more responsible kind of away from fossil fuels and into renewables and cleaner sources of fuel.
Yeah, yeah. And just, are you able to easily access or buy renewable energy in the Philippines, or is there a lack of supply?
Not yet. I guess it's also very early days for that. But I think what's encouraging is that there's a growing consciousness about the need to move away from coal and the damaging effects from using coal as a source of energy. Of course, you still have the practical side, I guess, of the whole thing. If you don't, renewables may be expensive, may not be easily available. We're hoping that the government will also provide incentives so that renewables will come into the market and become more available. But it may be early days, but I guess, as I said, some of the coal projects have already been canceled, and power producers are starting to think more and more about using cleaner sources of energy. Long ways to go, though.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Okay. That brings us to our last question, which is about inclusivity of digital technologies, making internet access available to the previously unconnected, those who couldn't afford it, who lived in very remote areas. I would just be interested if the panelists have got any perspectives to share on digital inclusion and how that can help to address these issues about climate change, biodiversity, and helping to protect the planet. So, Yondine, perhaps we could go back to you. Interested to see if you have any perspectives from the ITU about making digital technology available to more of the planet.
Yeah, digital inclusion is definitely a huge priority for the ITU, and when it comes to climate change and digital technologies, for instance, the technologies that we're talking about is stuff like frontier technologies like artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain, etc. But what we have to realize is that solutions for electronic waste management or climate change in general can be as simple as mobile applications or online platforms or access to these information sources. And that is from, the most basic kind of, for that, the most basic kind of foundation is having that network coverage, having access to those kind of those devices, and having access to the technical skills to be able to harness or even use this. And ITU, in our study, we found that a huge reason and a huge barrier for why, especially in lower income countries, rural population do not use the internet is due to simple lack of awareness. And it's not, even if the network exists, people are not able to leverage it and use it. So bring it again back to, kind of an electronic waste perspective. When it comes to digital inclusion, what we can think about is the informal workers, the informal side of electronic waste management, which is a huge issue, because in most countries in the developing sector, there's a huge informal sector that is thriving and basically runs the electronic waste management system, for instance, in India. And when we're trying to institute these additional solutions, what we have to think about is that, are we isolating them in some way by bringing in something like blockchain, or bringing in something like RFID trackers, etc., or bringing in something like an application that they don't have access to, a mobile phone, or there's many areas with spotty coverage, etc. So even in the solutions that you think is as simple as an end-to-end digital platform for the tracking of electronic waste, for instance, when you think about the different population that populates this value chain and the stakeholders involved, especially the informal sector, especially in these countries, those tend to be lower income, lower skilled workers. Access to a smartphone, or access to access to a smartphone to look at the app, or like identify where the collection center is nearest to you is, which is also some of the functionalities of these platforms, is not, we cannot take those kind of things for granted. So one thing that we definitely have found in our study is the need to really consider digital inclusion when we are developing these digital solutions, and when we're trying to think of how digital solutions can be leveraged for systems change, is that bringing in something like blockchain is not feasible in a country where there isn't already an electronic waste or even climate change kind of management system already in place, and those underlying technologies and those underlying digital skills in order to move forward and bring in more of the frontier technologies.
Okay, that's really interesting. Matt, I mean, the mobile industry is responsible for bringing digital technology and bringing the internet to billions of people across the world. So we should really sort of be applauding the achievements so far. But I guess there's more to go. There are still parts of the planet that are unconnected, or people certainly who are unconnected. Do you think mobile technology is the way to reach them, or should we be looking at some of these satellite projects, low Earth orbit satellite? Could that be the way to reach the unconnected that remain out there?
So I guess the quick answer is all the above. And you're right. Mobile penetration is constantly increasing. Last year, GSMA estimated that over 5 billion people are now subscribed to a mobile service. And by 2025, we're assuming that this is going to grow by another 600 million people. And a lot of that's going to be driven by new customers in Asia, Pacific, and Sub-Saharan Africa. So there's obviously huge potential for mobile and technologies that are linked to mobile or enabled by mobile devices to unlock a lot of new opportunities and services. And but it's right to question the need for more digital inclusion and better access to smartphones or mobile internet. We've just recently finished a project in Kenya, which is exploring how mobile technology can support participatory forest management. And that's a type of approach where community members help support the protection and regeneration and the monitoring of forests. And in return, they are given opportunities to access in a sustainable way forest resources that support their livelihoods. And what we found through this research project is that these local community members are enthusiastic supporters of digital innovation, and they want to use mobile tools and even smartphone applications to help them protect forest and allow them to create climate impact. And there's a really a great opportunity for these mobile tools to improve how data is collected, to enable these community members to access climate finance that rewards them for their services, or to share information and advice. And there's ways for basic phones to be used to achieve some of those things. So there's lots of interesting examples of how basic phones are used to share information and advice, even among peers, and to connect local community members with experts. There's also lots of ways for basic phones to collect and share data, but more impact or a richer experience is usually achieved by a smartphone. And of the community members we surveyed, only a third had a smartphone. So we have to think very carefully about how do we create these new opportunities that have transformative impact? How do we create digital tools that are going to accelerate progress without exacerbating this digital divide? So that's a challenge for us. It's a challenge in everything that we do. And thanks to support from UK Aid, for the last decade, we've been working on projects that have climate impact, and digital inclusion is at the heart of everything that we do. And these forest projects, the work that our agri-tech team is doing around weather forecasting and climate advisory services, and providing access to agricultural insurance, the work that our humanitarian team is doing to provide assistance to people who are displaced by inclement weather or food insecurity. We're always trying to think about how do we make sure that these services are accessible to as many people as possible. And really good point was made about building the capacity of individuals who might not have those digital skills. And I think working in collaboration with community-based organization and our NGO partners to make sure that there's a capacity building element as well, so that people understand how to use the technology effectively, but also understand the risks of using technology. I think that's a really important factor, or a really important step to take in all of the work that we do.
Interesting. And you mentioned UK Aid. I hope that isn't one of the UK Aid programs that's being lost due to cutbacks. That would be a real shame. Sheila from the ACB again, just be interested to see if you have any perspectives about this digital inclusion topic.
Yes, thank you, James. In ACB's work, web-based platforms such as Zoom have been instrumental in bringing together minds and experiences in biodiversity conservation, learning from others, particularly in mainstreaming biodiversity in sectors such as economics, health, agriculture, and interactions with those involved in the extractive industries such as fishing and mining. Such interactions are achievements in bringing the idea of biodiversity conservation closer to our non-traditional partners, people who have had no exposure to conservation in the past. The development of the ASEAN Biodiversity Dashboard that I mentioned earlier is considered as an achievement. It brings together data and information that have not been put together in one place earlier. It provides users with layers of information that could have otherwise taken a lot of time to put together. Such availability of information would hopefully respond to the urgency of biodiversity conservation in the ASEAN region. I'd like to talk about an item in our wish list. It is to have an app available for fishermen. One issue of fishing in this part of the world is that everything is harvested, regardless of species, size, but science informs us that there is such a thing as length at first maturity. This is where the fish has already contributed, have laid their eggs, and have contributed to replenishing the population. And the maximum would be smaller than those large ones that contribute a lot of eggs. So, well, in terms of the biology of the fish, super large ones have higher production. And we'd only want to encourage fishermen to catch the size between these two so that the populations are replenished. Our wish is to have an app for fishers and the smartphones to inform them of the length at first maturity of species that are in their target catches. Having such catch guidance could contribute to sustainable fisheries conservation. Thank you, James.
No, it's a really good example, Sheila. David, let's turn to you. again, this topic of digital inclusion, I guess Huawei's played a significant role in bringing internet access to parts of the world that were previously unconnected. Any insights, any particular achievements that you'd call out in terms of that digital inclusion?
Oh, thank you, Brother James. So actually, so today only half of the population on the earth have access to the digital technology. So to spur the national digitalization efforts to have more people and organizations benefit from digital technology and to leave no one behind in the digital world, Huawei adopts a multi-pronged approach to bridge the digital divide. For example, the Huawei Tech for All is a digital inclusive initiative that brings together global partners such as UNE, SEO, IUCN, ITU, and GSMA, governments, NGOs, and also rainforest collection to bring improvement to areas such as education, environment protection, health, and also balanced development. So for the healthcare, Huawei Smart Care health care solution at the three largest hospital in Thailand, so enables remote consultation, intelligent medical imaging analysis, and autonomous medical vehicles to provide more convenient patient care, reduce the workload of doctors, minimize contact, and greatly reduce the risk of cross-infection. For the environment protection, as I think Melissa said just now, Philippines is very nice, beautiful country, is rich over the nature and biological resources. So I have to also talk about Asia Pacific, to talk about the Philippines. Actually, in Asia Pacific, we have successfully launched the rainforest guardian system with the local governments. Yeah, so in Philippines, Palawan, and also in Malaysia, semi-natural national parks. So things that Melissa already shared, the rainforest project, so I would not go to the details. Yeah, so, but we know for the Philippine rainforest project is really a technology-driven protection project for the rainforest, initiated by Huawei and also the Department of Environment and Natural Resources of Philippines, and also the PLDT, Smart Communication, and the rainforest collections. After the system being implemented, so as a result, forest rangers receive real-time alerts of sounds and other indicators of forest destruction so that they can take action quickly. It has effectively prevented the logging incidents. So for Malaysia, during the implementation projects, so the pandemic have impacted the world tremendously. So with the movement restriction orders in place due to the pandemic, illegal logging and animal poaching have also been on the rise with the remote training. So IFC also is able to train the local rangers how and where to install the devices. So till now, I think both in Philippines and Malaysia, yeah, the system works well. So at the same time, Huawei also set up a 3-year Tech for Nature partnership with IUCN since last year. So aiming to scale up success in nature conservation through digital technology innovation. So Thailand has been selected as one of the 5 pilot countries to explore how the digital technology can help mitigate the human-elephant conflict in the local national parks. So for the balanced development, Huawei Rural Star solution has collected 40 million uncollected people worldwide in rural areas. So in addition, our mobile money solution also provides convenient mobile payment service for 150 million people who have no bank accounts. So looking forward, we believe that technology should not be in opposition to nature. It should help nature thrive. So we believe in using technology to reduce the digital divide and reduce the impact of human activities on nature and create partnership to make that happen. So we also hope continuously to work with our partners like IUCN, GSMA, ITU, and also our customer like the PLDT. So let's work together to protect our planet biodiversity. So thanks.
Saying it's been a great discussion. If anybody still has a point they'd like to raise or a question they'd like to ask themselves, then now's a good time to do so. But otherwise, I'd just like to say, it's been quite clear that digital technology is going to play a significant role in combating climate change. We talked about solar energy, for example. We can also play an important role in conserving nature and promoting biodiversity. We had some examples there about alarms to notify of logging in the rainforest, or of tracking animals to make sure that they either were there or weren't there. And then finally, we talked about digital inclusion, which I think is critical, so that more of the world can have access to the information and the technology to make their lives better. So as well as saving the planet and doing the right thing for the environment, it's also about making people's lives better at the end of the day. So it's been a really interesting discussion, some important messages, some very key takeaways for me. And I'd like just to thank you all for participating today. Any final comments or words from the panel before we wrap up? If not, then I'll just say thank you to Yondine Sherpa from the ITU, David Liu Killen from Huawei, Sheila Vergara from the ACB's Biodiversity Information Management, Matt Wilson from the GSMA, and Melissa Virgil de Dios from PLDT. Thank you very much for joining us today.
There's a house we can build. Every room inside is filled with things from far away. The special things I compile, each one there to make you smile on a rainy day. They can say it all sounds crazy. They can say we've lost our minds. I don't care if they call us crazy. Run away to a world that we design. Every night I lie in bed, the brightest colors fill my head. A million dreams are keeping